Then when it comes to being an architect, what was your biggest shock or surprise in the industry?
Biggest shock or surprise? It wasn't a shock, but we always knew we wouldn't earn that well.
In this video, I spoke to 3 South African architects who do not only own their own firms, but are also lecturers at some of South Africa's best universities. And they'll be showing you some of the big projects they worked on. And more importantly, things that you should probably know about architecture before it's too late. This is part 2 of being an architect in South Africa. What do you mainly do?
My work?
Yeah.
We do work in the residential sector, but quite a lot also in educational sector. And that is quite varied from small scale projects at schools to much bigger buildings, and like this one where we joint ventured on a project for the university.
What is your honest opinion on this building?
My honest opinion on this building? Sure. Don't know what you want from honest opinion, what you want to lie. I think we did well, given the difficulties of it. I think we were very happy, given that we worked on it for 6 years in a budget that came out at half. It's never finished, and it never will be finished. But I think we achieved everything we wanted to and more, and we're very happy that the building is well used. For us, most important was that it was a building that was for the students, and I think they seem happy. So.
No, they very much are happy.
What I really notice about buildings is their atmosphere. It's the feature that I'm looking for when I look at a building. And I suppose bringing an unusual and wonderful atmosphere into housing is what my speciality has sort of become. But the essence of it is the atmosphere of a building, which I appreciate and notice and focus on in any piece of architecture.
Then when it comes to being an architect, what was your biggest shock or surprise in the industry?
Biggest shock or surprise? It wasn't a shock, but we always knew we wouldn't earn that well. But that's the type of architecture you practice. So maybe the biggest surprise, I suppose it always is just how much of people skills you need. You're not taught people skills, you're taught design skills, but you don't understand how much of architecture is relationships with people, and then also understanding how people behave and how you design for people, which maybe we often design for aesthetics rather than people. So that is quite a surprise, and something you learn as you go, something you can't learn immediately at first.
So is it like learning how to be a good negotiator, or like social skills in general?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's a negotiator, a compromiser, a manipulator, a peacemaker, or you've actually got to be quite harsh and stick to your guns and actually do things. So it's knowing how to do certain things in different situations, but at the same time to listen and understand where other people are coming from.
I think being on site where you had a kind of a team of people who were finger pointing and not necessarily a team, which I know is, especially in bigger practices, in corporate projects, is kind of part of the course, and that's how it goes. Quite a few of the projects I got to work with some great builders where we really worked as a team. Very blessed or privileged, whichever way you look at it, with the contractors that I worked with, and it really was a team. And I felt like if they got something wrong, you kind of stepped up and tried to get a solution. And then one or two where it was terrible, and I think that was a big surprise. Working on projects where it felt like people were constantly finger pointing and trying to kind of save face, and no matter who they stamped in the back, was quite daunting and difficult. I know that's kind of par for the course with some of the big contracting firms, where that it really is just a blame game, and you've got to be you've got to cover your back and be so suspicious of everybody. So I think that came as a surprise to me. I didn't anticipate.
Do you feel like in most cases you need to think in that way?
Look, I think you're probably wise to think that way. I like personally, I battle with that. That's quite hard for me. So I found that quite jarring. But I think you're going to manage a lot easier if you do start making sure you put all your ducks in a row. Be suspicious of kind of your teammates a little bit, which isn't great to say. But I suppose you also need to kind of suss out who people are. So.
The way architects see themselves, coming from business where there are a lot of arrogant people, and there are a lot of people who are convinced about their skills that are not there. It's like the arrogance becomes like something that the person is depending on in and of itself. And that confidence can open doors. It's arrogance in some people at its worst, but sometimes it's confidence, which is good, and it opens doors. But with architects, I felt that there was so many concrete things that architects bring to the table, tangible things, practical stuff that no one else can do, that we are very nervous about, very tentative about. We don't even have half of the confidence that other professions have in the way they present themselves and go for opportunities.
So liability is an issue.
Pardon?
Liability.
Okay, like there's a lot of risk that comes with our responsibility. So we are very conscious of that risk all the time, to a point where we even doubt what we're bringing to the table. So yeah, I guess to a degree. But it's also like a culture of people, like I don't think we even value what we bring enough. And therefore we don't get some of the opportunities that we would have gotten if we had just clearly represented what we can bring. That really, it surprises me a lot.
What has been the biggest challenge for you?
The biggest challenge? Sure. I suppose is to make ends meet constantly and finding work. I'm not the best brander and marketer. So for me, that side has been more challenging. I enjoy the work. We've been lucky to have work all this time, but I'm not very good at marketing. So it's one of those things is that you've got to be good at many different things, certainly in a small firm, and no one's good at everything. So
do you think it's easier to be like working for a firm instead of owning a firm?
It depends what you like. If you're fed up with working for a boss,
then no. Maybe when it comes to like security and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's more about how do you create connections and networks that you can access work through, and that's hard work. And you've got to build up a reputation, and you've got to build up what your niche is that you can fit into, so that people will find you through what you do. As much, some people are lucky; they come with a network that comes through family and that, but others don't. And you've got to work a way around that and find how you fit in and where you could access work that maybe other architects aren't able to do.
I think finding a way to start that is true to yourself can be a little bit difficult. Because, as I've mentioned, there's the starting a practice option, there's at the academia option. There's different sorts of practices to have. It's not just when you open a practice, there's one particular way to do business, specializing in a particular market. Do you start based on an available opportunity? Do you start based on what you're actually good at? But at the same time, you can't expect to walk in and get responsibility for like the major design decisions on the first day. So finding the balance of like, okay, am I doing this for a season, which is the right thing for me to do in this moment? Or am I putting myself in a space where I'm actually just not going to be able to grow and give my best? So there's a level of self-knowledge that has to go into that. And there's a level of, there's some things no one's going to be able to help you with. You're just going to have to say like, either I can get through this or I can't. So it's that navigating of the career that you're going to be able to excel in. That is challenging. And because it's a creative profession, you really need to find something that's going to be fulfilling for you in order to be able to produce good work. So just knowing how to put together the career that was going to bring out the best in me as an architect I think has been the most challenging thing.
So what is the things you love the most about being an architect?
I think it kind of ties back to what I was saying originally, where creating space for somebody that you know is improving their lifestyle and they don't necessarily understand it, where if you're doing a house or a renovation for somebody, you know that you're improving the quality of the family and the life that they lead. If it's in a residential building, like a res that I was involved in, you can see, that friendships are going to be made because of the spaces and the bringing together of people in a way that they wouldn't if everybody was just behind closed doors in a long corridor. So I think kind of creating those moments in space and creating those social engagements for me, I think was probably one of the most rewarding, I think, part of being an architect.
I think you really have to become yourself, both in the degree and in the career. You're really forced to become. You really are forced to be honest about your own growth, because there's a reality to whether what you've done is good or not. A lot of courses you're just handing in, and it okay, granted, working harder than you thought you could will do something to you in any discipline. But I think in architecture, because there's a part of yourself that you put into things, and actually sometimes you even have certain opinions and you produce projects based on those opinions, and you look at it and you're like, wow, I was actually wrong. So that like self-confrontation that is just part and parcel of a creative career is something that is distinct, I think, to architecture. First of all, other people have opinions about it. Second of all, it's either a building that will stand and work or not. So you pour your heart and soul out into something, and then inevitably you will get honest feedback. And the things that aren't what you would have liked really force you to grow. And I think that is a really special thing about architecture. So yeah, I think I appreciate that about architecture.
Okay, this is a follow-up question. So why did you decide to start your firm? Or take over?
I left my last firm in a huff. I'd had a big fight with the bosses and I was fed up because it was a very difficult time to work at that firm. They were under financial constraint, and I left and wanted to go on my own. But I met a friend of mine and he convinced me to go to Michael Scholes, who was planning on retiring. And they'd just won the competition for this building behind us, for the construction economics. And he said they needed help and there was possibility to I suppose, then be in my own firm eventually. And so we worked under Michael for a while, and then he retired eventually. And it was Mike Rain and myself who had the business together. So he and I worked together for about 3 years, and then he left for the UK. And so I didn't necessarily go in straight into my own firm. It grew out of another situation.
What made you comfortable in carrying on your own?
I suppose it was because of the previous experience where you have a fallout, not a fallout with the boss, but where, you know, being your own boss, you have your own control of your own time and the projects that you work on. You get to choose, so you have a lot more flexibility. And I'd already had enough experience to actually work on multiple different projects. And we started already then to try different ways of accessing work, like through collaborations, that we could bring in different types of work into the office.
Why did I start my own practice? I wanted the flexibility. I just couldn't get myself to go through the interview process again and sit in an office and learn new culture and have a new boss. I think you just get to a point where you feel like actually, not that there's nothing more to learn. I think there's always a lot more to learn, but you kind of feel I can't do this anymore. I actually would like to work for myself now and be my own boss. I wanted flexibility in my own time, and obviously your own creative kind of process. A lot of the firms I worked for, incredible firms, a lot of beautiful designs, but there were very much there was a very much a hierarchy of designers and people who kind of put drawings together and executed designs and made sure the designs were implemented on site. So you didn't necessarily have this, control over some of the designs. And I think I wanted to be in a space where I had more creative control, but also more flexibility with my time.
And what sort of architecture have you been producing?
A lot of my own work has been residential, so either new builds or renovations. Which I know when I started architecture, I was kind of adamant that was not a space I wanted to go into, and I've actually found it very rewarding. So it's been a really rewarding space for me to be in.
Then this is the last question. What advice would you give to the younger version of yourself?
The younger version of myself.
From Matric.
Oh, not to take everything so seriously. And use, I suppose, where's my phone? I would say that one should celebrate other interests that you have more earlier on in one's career, because those are the things that can define how you actually practice. So things other than architecture, and not to obsess too much on buildings, but rather understand where you fit in.
If I can ask you, like, what is your interest? Like the ones that you
My interests? Well, I love gardening and planting.
Oh yeah, your firm has plants literally
we just
everywhere.
grow plants everywhere, and we try and see where we bring them into work. I'm an amateur meteorologist.
Oh, really?
I follow the weather, I track storms,
okay,
I do all sorts of funny things. I also am interested in public life, public space, and that's why I did urban design. And having a small firm and a small practice, have managed to not bring my family into the practice, but understand the role of family within practice. So I think one is impacted by many other things other than just form making and architecture.
I think what I didn't realize in grade 12 is that it's you who's actually discovering yourself, and other people can help and contribute, but and I think in a way I was a little bit too open to being molded by how other people saw me, instead of really being true to what I knew I could be. If somebody puts something on you that you don't agree with or don't want to be, then it's your decision that prevails, not what that person put. because it really puts you on a roller coaster ride when you take everyone's opinion of you in equally. It makes you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of doubt about your own ability, whereas when you just focus on being honest with yourself about where you are and where you want to go, about your strengths, about your weaknesses, but you actually trust your own perspective on yourself the most, you have a smoother kind of journey. So I wish I had known that earlier.
I think I tend to kind of think about a problem and then try and think the solution through. And especially on site, it requires you to come up with a solution immediately. So I think maybe being quicker with response time sometimes, especially if you're on site. And I hope that's something I try and teach as well, is to try and come up with solutions a lot quicker. Because I think at the end of the day, what you draw on paper isn't necessarily 100% what gets built. And kind of issuing an instruction and sitting down with a contractor and making sure that you both get what you want out of it is a speedier process.
So do you think being a perfectionist is an issue?
I think it definitely can be a hindrance. And I think you can get into trouble if you're trying to get especially if it was a change in a detail that you had thought through and now you've got to adjust. And spending time thinking about that when you're on site and there are possibly delays, you have to defend yourself quite rigorously, which can be quite hard sometimes. And instead of trying to get it right and perfect, because often time is of the essence. I think maybe being a bit more time conscious.
I actually want to rewind and ask the last question. During your years when you're studying architecture, was it difficult for you? And if it was, or if it wasn't, like, how did you structure everything? How did you get through it?
No, I really enjoyed studying. I think Wits was quite an eye-opener, leaving school and coming to Wits, where there was free thought was encouraged, and it was a lot more free in terms of who you met, what you did, where you went, and what you like. Architecture exposed us to more of our city than I knew growing up. In terms of how I structured my time, I suppose I think you work harder today than we did. We played quite hard, I suppose. We make time to not do architecture, and we go out every Friday, go out every Monday.
That's no longer reality right now.
There was Monday nights was Roxy's. We were a member of clubs at Wits. We would go exploring, go hiking, do things to get away from architecture. I was in a class where we were quite lucky. We would go away together. We'd go camping. We'd do other things and get away. We were not known as a class of obsessive architects or the real architect who feel they're going to save the world. We had interests beyond buildings, and I think that's important because you can see that it's not about just the building, it's about a lot more than building.
So do you feel like the social connections that you make while studying are crucial?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see many of the architects I studied with because most of them have left the country, I suppose.
Well.
But I suppose it's more about we're not so important. As in, architects often put themselves on a pedestal as these important people.